Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with my next update for my No Pan Left Behind project. This is a project that I started in February as kind of like a low-key secondary project pan where I focus on my eyeshadow palettes. If you don't know already, which you probably know because I mentioned it in quite a few videos, I do want to try to use every single eyeshadow in my collection this year, and this project just enables me to reach for more of my palettes and actually get closer to my goals. So this project is not really something that I am highly focusing on. I'm kind of just slowly getting through my palettes through this project. My focus projects are still Pan palette, Pandas eyeshadows, and Project Level Up. I also, on top of that, have a single eyeshadow project pan as well, which is my Armageddon project pan. So I have a lot of eyeshadow focused project pans this year, but again, I want to get more use out of my eyeshadows in general, so that's why. But in this project I am working on 3 palettes at any point in time, and I want to use them no pan left behind. And on top of that, I'm also going to share with you the palettes that I have used no pan left behind so far in my collection. But let's just start off with the 3 eyeshadow palettes that I was working on. But before I jump into those, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So the 3 palettes that I was working on for February were these 3 right here. We had my Rose Quartz palette from Huda Beauty, my Natasha Nona Love palette, and my Pat McGrath Divine Rose 1 palette. So going through these, I'm happy to say that I have used all 3 of these no pan left behind. The Pat McGrath one looks like this. You can see all the shadows here. I feel like this was a nice kind of wintry kind of palette to reach for. That's why I wanted to reach for it quite early. And I really like this palette. I did quite a few looks. I did one look with majority of these eyeshadows. I think I did like a more kind of cool tone look. We're using it like the mattes, and I believe I used like this eyeshadow here as a base and then topped it with this one here. And I also did a look with this gold here. And I know I included this one as a separate look as well. So I think I did 2 looks mainly using this palette, and then eventually I only had this one left to use, and I used that with like more kind of one-toned eyeshadows, which were beautiful. It does actually have like a really strong pink base and a gold shift, as you can see, and it's a really nice eyeshadow. And I did really enjoy this palette. I had used it before. I had used every single shadow in this palette last year. I got this one in November, I believe. And even though I had already reached every single eyeshadow back then, I feel like I got to know this palette more using it this time around, and I'm really happy that I included this one in the project. The second palette, like I mentioned, that I had in this project was my Natasha Nona Love palette. This one is obviously one that is quite fitting for February. It was a Valentine's Day release, and it looks like this. So I did want to use this one as well, mainly for the color story in here. And also I was focusing on a red and a pink in my Panda palette for the month of February, so I thought this one would complement those eyeshadows quite a bit. Obviously there are some pink and red shades in here as well, so I thought obviously that would go with color story. And I did use this one quite a lot in combination with those eyeshadows. I don't think I did any look really just fully using this palette. I might have done one using like these kind of lighter pinks, this one here, and was it Pure Love maybe, and maybe Lifetime. I did like one look. I think I had like a few eyeshadows left to use in here, and I brought them like, because these are magnetic pans, I brought them when I went up to my boyfriend's parents. I kind of put them into my C palette, and I think I did a look with those on their own. But mainly this palette was kind of like a complement to other things that I was working on. And it's a bit of a shame because I still don't really have a feeling about this palette, like you know, what I think of it or what kind of looks I can do with it on its own. So I wish I did more looks with this palette as a whole standalone palette, but I was working on so many eyeshadows, and February was a month that I was very overwhelmed, so I used to try to get use out of eyeshadows wherever I could, so that's why I didn't use it more in like individual looks. Then lastly we have my Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette. This is one of my favorite palettes. It's again more of a cool toned kind of mauve tone palette. It is stunning. I did a few looks with this one. I know I did like one kind of warm tone looks using these 3 here. I think I might have topped it with other things too, but those were like the main eyeshadows in that look. I think that was actually, that might have been for my boyfriend's birthday, and I was really happy with that look. They blended really beautifully. I think I even used this deep brown here to deepen it up even more. And again, I just topped it off with more of a sparkly eyeshadow to like top it off. But this one does have really sparkly shadows too, but those are more kind of cool tone leadings. So I did use a single, I think it was my Terramon's Meteorite eyeshadow paired with those, and it was such a beautiful look. I really loved it. You can really build up the depth with this palette using those eyeshadows. And this brown here, it is more on the cool tone side, but it does work with those more warm tone shades as well, so I could really build up the depth when I used that, when I made that look. I also did more of a look using these mauve tones. I think this one, and I think I used I definitely used this one. I think I might have used this brownie in there too. And I made like more of a taupey kind of mauve look. And I love these two eyeshadows here. They're super sparkly, super kind of glittery, but like in a like almost indie kind of way. I love those. This one is similar to, not just, it's just slightly less sparkly than the other ones, but yeah, I love that one too. And this palette overall is a really good one. I'm so happy that I got to use it, and I'm definitely going to try to use this one more, even though it has been used this year, because you know, I love it so much, and I do want to make it look more loved because it is one of my favorite palettes in my collection. So that means that I did use all of my 3 palettes, no pan left behind, so I will be replacing those with 3 new palettes. But before I do so, I want to cover the palettes that I have used no pan left behind so far in the year. So the first palette in the year that I used no pan left behind was my Anastasia Soft Glam palette. This one looked like this. I have used this one and no pan left behind. It was I had the shade Rose Pink in my Panos eyeshadows in January, so I did use every single shade in here while I was working on that one. So this one is completed. I also have my Modern Renaissance palette, which is my Panda palette from last year, which I'm still trying to finish. I currently have 2 shades left in here, but I did have 3 at the beginning of the year, and I had used those 3 of those. So that's another one that's no pan left behind, but again, it was only like 2-3 shades, so not that much. But that is completed as well. The third palette I have used no pan left behind is another one that was in my Pandos eyeshadows in January, and that is my Huda Beauty Light Nude Obsessions. And this one looks like this. I was working on this eyeshadow here in my Pandos eyeshadows, and I used every single shade in here while I was working on that. And it's a £9, so it's quite an easy one to use no pan left behind, but I'm happy that I did with this. The next palette that I used no pan left behind was my Project Level Up Level 1 palette, and that was my Club Nebula palette from Kaleidos. Obviously with my Project Level Up, I have to use every single shadow in the palette and hit a couple pans depending on the level. So I did use every single shadow in here once, and I hit one pan which was in Celestial right here. So this one was rolled out of my Project Level Up, but I did use it no pan left behind through that project. Surprisingly, a little bit lower on my list is actually my Panda palette for the year. I'm not going to open this up because it is my Panda palette, but you probably all know what this looks like. This is the Tutorials and Beauty Bay palette. I did use this one no pan left behind. It actually took me quite a while to do that, even though it is my Panda palette, because it has, I think it's 20 shades, yeah, 20 shades, and there's like 2 shades in here that I don't reach for very often. There's one that is called Underground, which is just one of my favorites, and I believe that's the one that I had left to use, and I didn't use that until I think beginning of February, so it took quite a while. But this one again is no pan left behind, obviously it's my Panda palette. After that, the next palette that I did hit no pan left behind on was my Natasha Nona Love palette, so that's when that one comes in. And right after that, I used my Pat McGrath Divine Rose palette, no pan left behind. So those 2 were hit kind of at that stage. Then next up we have my Anastasia Subculture palette. This one was actually my level 2 palette, so I did use every single shadow in that project through there, and I hit 2 pans which were in All Star and Fudge. So those 2 I hit, and then I did use every single shadow in here twice. So this one again was used no pan left behind. The last palette that I have on the list is actually my current Level Up palette, and I have used every single shadow in there, and that is my Norvina palette from Anastasia again. I have used every single eyeshadow in this palette. I've actually used it the last couple of shadows today to create this look. So today I have the shade Soul on my outer corner, then I have Celestial on like my middle of my lid, and then Wild Child on like the inner part, but I have topped that off with kind of sparkly shadow from Glam Shop. It was the shade Sorsa, but I used the last 3 eyeshadows that I hadn't used in this palette today, so I have used this one no pan left behind as well. And again, it is my Project Level Up palette, so this one will definitely get some more use. I have not used all of the shadows 3 times yet, and I obviously have not hit any pans in that project. I do have pan on Volatile. And if you haven't seen my product pan on my Panos eyeshadows update, which is my last video, bit of a spoiler, but I did hit pan on that one, but that one is outside of my Product Level Up, so I still have to hit 3 more pans in this palette, but at least I have used no pan left behind now. So that is the last palette that I have used no pan left behind so far. And if you keep in count, that means I have used 10 of my palettes no pan left behind so far in the year. And in total I have 42 palettes in my collection, so that is 23.81% of my palettes have so far been used, no pan left behind, and I'm really excited about that. Obviously, staying on track, I would have had to use like 25% of my palettes by the end of March, no pan left behind, if I want to like keep on track. And I definitely think I'm going to succeed with that. I think, yeah, I'm definitely going to surpass that even. And I mean, that's good because I also have all my singles to use, so staying on top of this project is very good, especially now in the beginning of the year. But that is where I am with my no pan left behind kind of status at the moment. So then the question is, what palettes am I rolling in for the month of March, or kind of for like the next couple, however long until my next update. And I decided to roll in 3 new palettes. The first one, which is the largest one of the 3, is my Book of Magic palette from Beauty Bay. This one I am currently working on in my Pan eyeshadows right now, and I'm working on the shade Amulet. And I have used a couple shades in here. I would probably say I've used like maybe a third of this palette so far. But I know that I don't really reach for these like turquoise shadows and these really deep shadows very often. So putting it into this project will mean that I can reach for those eyeshadows and get this palette out as like no pan left behind. I have mentioned several times, but this is probably my least favorite palette in my collection. And so I want to add this into this project just so I can have like a goal to reach with no pan left behind, because otherwise I feel like this is going to be one that stays like to the end of the year without having to be used, if that makes sense. So that is the first palette. The other 2 palettes are a little bit smaller. The smallest of the 3 is this palette right here, which is my Natasha Nona mini retro palette. This is a palette that I have not used very much yet. I've used this no pan left behind last year, and so I have used this palette, and I think I reached for a couple of shades more than once as well. But in general, this is quite an unused palette in my collection, and I think this is going to be one that can work quite well for springtime, especially when we go from like the colder months, like between winter and spring, because it does have more cool tone shadows, but it has those kind of pastel-y kind of tones in it that I feel like works for spring. So I'm excited to reach for this one, and it's the next palette that I'm rolling in. Then for the last one, we could not have no pan left behind or introduce a palette, I guess, in the month of March without including a green palette. So the palette that I have decided to go for is my Star Wars Mandalorian palette. This is one of my favorite palettes in my collection. I love this palette, and it has quite a few greens, as you can see. It does have more kind of minty greens. I guess like, I don't know, this here and this here kind of on the more minty side, whereas this is more kind of I don't know, they're like very neutral browns, but they're very wearable as well. I was considering putting in like a different palette, for example my Mountain Trail palette from Sydney Grace, or my Wilderness palette, but I feel like both of those palettes are more autumnal. Same with my Metropolis palette, for example, from Natasha Nona. So I don't want to roll this in yet, but this one kind of leans more again on the spring side. So that is why I'm choosing to introduce this palette, and I'm very excited to reach for this one. Again, it's one of my favorite palettes in my collection, and it's gotten some good use. You can see I have 4 pans in here, and yeah, I love this palette so much, so I'm very excited to reach for this one for the month of March. So that is it for my no pan left behind updates. I really hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you think I structured it okay. I did want to like kind of cover all the palettes that I use even outside of this project, no pan left behind, and kind of where I am with percentage. I do have obviously more palettes that I have not used yet outside of this project, but I'm not going to cover them until I have used every single shadow in those palettes. And I will also do at the end of every quarter, like I did last year, I will do a eyeshadow kind of wrap up or palette wrap up, where I show all the palettes that I reached for in the quarter. So if you're interested in the ones that I have reached for in the quarter but maybe not hit no pan left behind on yet, you will see that in that video. But again, that is it for today. I really hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye guys.